97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher.
My personality is I want to win badly. I want to win more Lombardis for Philadelphia and our fans. We got the greatest fans around, and I will do everything possible.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. A new edition dropped this morning at 6 a.m. Get the latest one at Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, 6 a.m. Listen for the Inside the Birds podcast with Adam Kaplan and this man, Geoff Mosher. He's brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back for everything from skincare, cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelylback.com or call 856-MAKEOVER. Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. Okay, Geoff Mosher is on the Boardwalk Honda hotline, and he is with us now. So a lot to get into. Draft is coming up, and obviously free agency, but still a lot of things on the coaching side here that we want to touch on first. Let's start with today's news. Brian Johnson is the new quarterbacks coach. Interesting twist to him. His background with not Carson Wentz, but Jalen Hurts is kind of interesting, Geoff Mosher.
I didn't know about it till earlier. Mike Sealski obviously brought it to the attention via Twitter that he has known Jalen Hurts since he was 4 years old and recruited him to Mississippi State. So there's a history there, and you do have to wonder if any of that history was an allure to Nick Sirianni or how they are even connected, because I don't think that they've worked together in any prior stops. I do know that Brian Johnson was, obviously regarded as a rising type of coach. He worked with Dak Prescott at Mississippi State. He worked with Kyle Allen, who was at Houston when he was there as the quarterback's coach. And, of course, De'Aaron King, right, who's now the Miami quarterback. I hope I pronounced that name correctly. So he's worked with some quarterbacks here who've got some acclaim to them. And, of course, in Florida, what he's done with Kyle Trask. So, you look at that and you say the resume is good, but then you also look at the Eagles staff and say it's got some youth and some inexperience to it, especially on offense.
Yeah, and obviously there's more to this story with Hurts, too. I mean, he recruited Hurts. I mean, he played football for Hurts' father or something to that effect in high school. So there is a pretty interesting background between these two guys. So do you hire a quarterback coach? Was he to work with Hurts? Was he to work with Wentz? I mean, I find this to be a very interesting dynamic here because everybody just assumed you brought this coaching staff in and they were here to fix Carson Wentz. And then you got a quarterback coach who looks like he would be more tailored to work with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. And, on top of that, and this is just, obviously spitballing and speculating and things, but we do know that, one of the issues between Press Taylor and Carson Wentz for other people was that they felt Press was too close to Carson, didn't coach him hard enough. So now you find out that you've got Jalen Hurts here and you've got a quarterback's coach who practically, not only say grew up with him, but obviously, as you mentioned, the closeness to the family, the dad, known him since he was 4 years old. Is that kind of the same version of what you just had last few years with Press Taylor and Carson Wentz? I mean, it's way too early to know about that, but it obviously stands out because of the context that we know.
All right, so we do know that Brian Johnson is now the new quarterback's coach here, and essentially the staff is almost put together. I guess they need a wide receiver coach. Is that what's left?
Well, it depends. I mean, there are a lot of coaches that are still under contract. So if, for example, last year they hired Aaron Moorhead, so he is technically right now still the Eagles wide receivers coach by virtue of his contract.
You can change the room, but you can't change the crappy Wi-Fi.
Man, you know what? You can take me out of Siberia, but yeah, I heard what you said. I'm sorry. I don't know what I can do. But the point I was making was that Aaron Moorhead did have a discussion, and I was told it was a good discussion, and we'll see what happens. I think it's not a great idea to try to hire somebody new at every position. I think it's good to have some holdovers as long as these are competent coaches, because you need some continuity. If they were to bring in a new wide receivers coach, what would that be? Would that be the 6th in 6 years or the 5th in 5 years? If you look at the talent development on this team at wide receiver, at some other positions, and you wonder why that's been an issue. It's not always just coaching. It's not always just where they're drafted. It's it's the continuity and the time to develop. New coaches have new ideas, new perspectives, and new schemes. So it would be nice to see a couple of guys, as long as they're deemed competent, get a chance to really work with their position group for more than a year or two.
Now, by the way, Moorhead's a Colts guy, isn't he? He played for the Colts.
He
not
did
in
play
the
for the
Sirianni
Colts.
era.
Yeah. But I think he coached. Like, he was an assistant. He may have a connection to coaching, but I'm not sure if Sirianni was there at the time anyway.
Now that things are somewhat coming together, what's one thing that intrigues you about this staff as a whole and one thing that concerns you?
Well, I'll start with the concern. It's something that we talked about today on the Inside the Birds podcast that dropped this morning. It is very common for a first-time head coach who is young, like Nick Sirianni is, to bring in a veteran, to surround yourself with someone who's either been a head coach or a coordinator before. I noted that Sean McVay's first hire was a defensive coordinator, was Wade Phillips, right, who had been a head coach. Kevin Stefanski brought in his defensive coordinator, whose name is escaping me right now, but that guy has been a defensive coordinator before. I mean, Chip Kelly came in here and brought in Pat Shurmur, right? Chip Kelly's first year in the NFL, and he had Pat Shurmur as his offensive coordinator. And Doug Peterson had a really nice nucleus of veterans with Frank Reich and with DeFilippo and, of course, Jim Schwartz. So right now they don't have that kind of guy. They have Jeff Stoutland, but they really don't have anything else on the offensive staff or on the team that you consider a veteran coach who's either been a head coach or been a longtime coordinator. So that would be my concern. And Adam reported that he gets the sense that Sirianni will bring one in. So we'll see if he does that. But as of right now, that's my concern. You asked me what I'm intrigued about. I do feel like I'm intrigued about the defensive coordinator, Gannon. He comes very highly recommended. Adam said a few people he spoke to kind of mentioned that Gannon was considered kind of the next DC in waiting by a lot of teams. And even a couple of people I spoke to said that they had gotten to know him and felt like he was very deserving of the opportunity. And he might bring more cover two, which we didn't see a lot of with Jim Schwartz. And he might bring some more blitzing, which, as we know, we didn't see a whole lot of with Jim Schwartz. So to me, it's not about how often you're blitzing, but how good are your blitzes. So I'd like to see what he brings to the table from that standpoint.
Now, he was a guy that others wanted, but do you get the feeling that he was a guy the Eagles would have targeted regardless of Sirianni being here?
Yeah, I was actually told that Jeffrey Lurie was aware of who Jonathan Gannon was, and he was very enticed by the idea of being able to bring him over. So there was some excitement about that. And the fact that, I think he had some offers. I forget what. I think there was a report that the Rams were interested, but obviously not the Rams. Was it the Chargers maybe? I don't know. One of the teams. I don't know if he would have been the play-calling defensive coordinator. Here he will be the play-calling defensive coordinator.
You had Joe Banner on a recent episode of Inside the Birds TV. Was there anything that he said that you went, raised your eyebrows a bit?
Oh, man, I really encourage people to check it out. I know we've had Joe on before. I find him to be very insightful, and he always gives us some new things that are pretty fascinating. He talked he had a couple of things that I thought was interesting. One, he talked about when he knew they got it right on Andy Reid, which was pretty early in the process. He talked about the interview process itself and how he always wanted to have as many different interviews as possible. He talked about the vetting of head coaches. Once you kind of come across a guy that you like, how do you then go and vet? And how do you separate the idea? And this is where I think a lot of teams struggle. A person who interviews well versus a person who's a really good head coach, because some people are just natural salesmen and they say the right things and you get a great feeling when they articulate their vision about them, and then they wind up not being a very good head coach. I mean, look, Adam Gase has wowed 2 franchises, right, with whatever he has said in the interview chair, and he has failed in both franchises that he's coached. So it's a very difficult thing to separate the two concepts. And one last thing that he talked about extensively was for him, when he hired somebody specifically on his staff, Joe Banner talking about coming into the front office, he discouraged people from hiring people that you worked with in the past. He always felt like if a person just hired people they worked with in the past, that they weren't doing their enough diligence around who the best and brightest minds are around the league. They're hiring more on comfort, right? And so he tried to discourage people, which is a common thing. You see people, whether it's a GM or whether it's a head coach, they're, as you see now with Sirianni bringing in Shane Steichen, who he coached with, and Gannon, who he coached with, you always want somebody to really know everybody around the league and kind of step out of their comfort zone and make sure they're getting the right people and not just the people they're comfortable with.
By the way, the Eagles did hire a tight end coach today, Jason Michael, and he's interesting because he's been a tight end coach, but he's also been a quarterbacks coach. He was an offensive coordinator, and it's interesting because he went from offensive coordinator in Tennessee to quarterbacks coach. It's almost like he took a demotion there, but here's a guy who's been a coordinator, quarterbacks coach, tight ends coach, and has been around the league. So of all the guys on the staff so far that I've seen, 42, he's the oldest guy.
Yeah, how about that? He's going to be the elder statesman. I'm sure he's not really looking at that and feeling great about it. You're right. I do feel like what happened with him in Tennessee was accurately should be considered a demotion. And, before Arthur Smith got there, I'm not sure they had an offense that really wowed you. But he's a tight ends coach. So, they obviously have Dallas Goedert.
And by the way, he came here from the Colts.
The Titans, I thought. Was it the Colts?
He was with Tennessee, but was with Indianapolis last year.
Oh, that's right. I had forgotten about that. Good call. Yeah. So there you go. There's that. Talks about that connections again. Look, it's hard. One thing I got to be fair with. It's really hard to put together a coaching staff in your first year when you were one of the last hires, because a lot of teams now, if they've lost guys, they've patched it up, right? They've made their hires, or if you're trying to get guys, they're under contract and they need to be let out. If you remember last year, the Eagles talked to James Urban about their wide receivers coach opening, but they took a long time before they hired Aaron Moorhead. And I think John Harbaugh was a little, I don't know if he was outspoken about it or said something, but he got a little miffed about how long it was taking the Eagles to either, make a decision here. So it's hard when you're a first-time head coach to get all the guys that you want. And sometimes you just have to go with guys that you at least know or comfortable with.
We keep hearing about Sirianni and the fact that he likes 12 personnel. Does that mean anything in terms of the future at tight end right now with Ertz, or is it pretty inevitable based off of the contract situation?
Well, it could. It's they may not be hand in hand. He really might like the idea of 12 personnel and want to play more. But as you, me, Mike, and everybody else knows, the Eagles need to shave salary off in a big way. So they're going to have to make some difficult decisions. And there's not. If you have a guy like Dallas Goedert, right, Hunter, and you have a coach who likes 12 personnel, well, you can look at the situation and say, we can still trade Zach Ertz. We have Richard Rodgers, who actually played fairly well for us last year, and you can come back cheap. You could also use, if you are able to trade Zach Ertz, if you're able to make a few more moves and that give you some draft picks, you can probably draft a kid to groom along the way. And then, of course, they have Caleb Wilson. And so it's not like you can't play 12 personnel if you get rid of Zach Ertz. You just have to be able to have some good reinforcements at the position. But, you feel pretty good, though, still with Dallas Goedert as your number one tight end.
So, Moach, let me ask you about free agency. And with the cap situation that the team is in, does that tell you that they will not be able to be a player in free agency?
Oh, man, I don't know how they could.
I'm talking about just even like, I say this, we were talking with Andrew yesterday. There's a lot of Colts who are free agents in the secondary. There's a guy like Trey Burton who's a free agent. If you let Ertz go, maybe you bring I'm talking about lower level guys that so they got to make some changes, right? They can't just say, hey, we're so strapped and not turn the roster over at all.
Correct. I mean, they're look, first of all, they're going to get cap compliant because they have no choice, right? So they're going to make these decisions. They're going to get to the cap. Now, the question is, how under the cap will they be to be able to make a significant free agent addition? That's where it's going to be very difficult. Last year they had the ability to bring in a guy like Javon Hargrave, to bring in Darius Slay and maneuver the contract a little bit. This year, I don't think you're going to be getting a stud-like free agent in that regard. Now, Trey Burton might just be the type of guy who you can sign to a one-year deal for not a lot of money. That might be a guy that they can afford. But you look at cornerback, right? Outside of Darius Slade, they have no outside cornerbacks. And you can't just rely on, especially this team, drafting an outside cornerback and saying that's my guy, right? We're going to move Avonte Maddox outside and we'll use our first or second or third round pick to start on the outside while Maddox slides inside. But, at the same point, by the same token, cornerbacks are expensive. Even like just good ones wind up making a lot of money on the free agent market. So you wonder how the Eagles will be able to address some of their positions and some of their holes when they really don't have a lot of money to spend in free agency.
Yeah.
Buckle up.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be the greatest year for the Eagles in 2020.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But considering all the holes on this roster, would you look, or I should say, is offensive tackle out when it comes to that number 6 overall pick? Like, you don't need to go in that direction because there's so many other holes that you might be able to hang on with what you have for at least another year or two?
Well, I mean, there's the Geoff Mosher answer and the Howie Roseman answer. The Geoff Mosher answer is absolutely should not be out. I mean, if an offensive tackle is there and you have him graded as a top guy and he's that good, we've seen how injuries have taken their toll on this offensive line, and you can't have enough good ones. And
yeah, but
you know what?
Don't you feel, Moshe, that I get what you're saying. I'm not saying that it's not a potential need, but don't you say, look, we have some in-house things. Let's have Dillard and Mailata battle out for that. Johnson's back, Brooks is back, and if they break down, fine. We're probably bad again. They break down, but we have enough other holes that instead of drafting a lineman, who if I draft a tackle, is he playing right away? I mean, then you're telling me that Dillard's not playing. Then you're telling me Mailata's not playing or Johnson's not playing. So you're going to take a guy and basically say he's going to be in a battle when I can get a guy who I know is going to play.
Well, so that would be maybe the Howie Roseman answer. And I'll say this. If it's close, if it's a tie, Mike, right, if you have a similar grade on an offensive tackle and a cornerback like Patrick Surtain or something, then I would think that the Eagles would go with the cornerback for what you're saying. But if you have if you feel like this offensive tackle in your grading is a future Hall of Famer or a 6-7-time Pro Bowler, and you skip that to take somebody else who's not, you think is a good player but not as good, then you're making a big mistake in my opinion.
Well, did you think that Jalen Reagor was a Hall of Famer?
Well, you're talking about not the 6th overall pick. You're talking about the bottom of the first round. I mean, I didn't think anybody at that point was going to be a future Hall of Famer.
I agree with the premise of eventually you're going to need, I feel like, though, they owe it to themselves to find out what Dillard is and if Mailata can play, and then maybe that position you don't need to draft a new one for. You know what I mean? I see your face is kind of – this is the thing with this video right now, because now I can see your reaction to some of my questions.
I hear what you're saying, but I would say you owe it to yourself to develop and put together the best possible team that you can. And if you do that and you follow that blueprint, you will succeed. And so I do think that you don't pass up on a guy for another guy if you have him higher rated.
You feel like they've made a decision on Dillard?
I feel like they probably will go into the OTAs thinking that Jordan Mailata, assuming they don't, bring in another offensive tackle in the first round or something. I would think that they go in thinking that it's Jordan Mailata's job to lose, but they would love for Andre Dillard to go and take it.
Okay, that's interesting.
No doubt about it.
Real quick on the line, feeling on Kelsey, and if Kelsey doesn't return, does Seumalo move there, or do they keep him at guard?
So it's a great question, and that goes back to why I think you can draft at any position because you may have movement, right? I think if Kelsey retires, I believe their inclination would be to move Seumalo to center and then fill left guard. I know that when they drafted Jack Driscoll, even though they started him at tackle, they felt like he had the athleticism to play guard. He came from Auburn, an RPO-heavy program. They just wanted him to get a little bit bigger and stronger in the offseason. So he could potentially be the next left guard if you move Seumalo to center. However, Nate Herbig, don't forget, he started off his career with the Eagles as a center, played guard last year, did actually better than a lot of people thought he would have done. I mean, he's not perfect, and he really needs to improve in pass pro, but is a good run-blocking offensive lineman, and he could probably also, if they don't want to move Seumalo out of left guard, they could consider Nate Herbig at center and keeping Seumalo at left guard and Brooks at right guard if Brooks is coming back.
What is a fair expectation for the right side?
What do you mean if Brooks is coming back?
Yeah, I snuck that by you, didn't I?
Well, you didn't sneak it by me. Maybe him.
Whoa. Did you hear? I just brought up the right side of the line. I got cut off by everybody. But go ahead, expand.
He tried to sneak that by.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did.
Because it was
coming. A bunch of
coming.
Carter Harts out there. You already know.
Hey.
I only bring that up because I know the Eagles, and listen, this is nothing I've been told, or I don't want anybody to think I'm reporting anything, but I'm looking at it analytically. I know the Eagles, they have to make difficult decisions. They have to shave off salary. Brandon Brooks is going to be 30. He's coming off a second Achilles. I thought it was interesting that they activated him into the 21-day window on the last week of the season, which to me was kind of a broadcast that, hey, he's healthy enough and medically cleared to be out there. You wonder if he would be a person that they would consider trading because the value on Brandon Brooks still might be pretty decent. Everybody's seen the videos. They know he looks like an Adonis out there and that he's coming back from his second Achilles and yet another record time, right? Because he could have technically played, I guess, in the season finale. So we know the team needs to get younger. I don't think you should dismiss the idea that they would look around and see if they can get something decent for him.
Well, what would you do at right guard then? Would that be a Driscoll spot?
Could be a Driscoll spot. Absolutely. And then maybe you'd play Herbig at or if Kelsey stays, you have Kelsey staying at center and Sam Howell left guard.
Now, you mentioned Brooks. Would Lane Johnson also be a cut candidate?
Probably. I don't know about not a cut, and I don't think they would cut Brooks either. I said, shop him around and see if you'd get anything interesting for him. I think it's different from Lane because he's a tackle, not a guard. I think with guard you can get by a little bit, as good as Brandon Brooks was. I mean, if you have just a pretty decent guard in there and really good tackles, you can have a pretty good offensive line. It's not one of those great value positions in the NFL, to be honest. So.
Yeah, the issue I'm having, though, when we talk about this is, all right, Mailata at left tackle. Maybe Herbig's playing center. Driscoll at right guard. Like, isn't this the line that we had last year that we looked at as a problem? And now we're sitting here going, well, they can do this and they can do that. And it's like, well, that's part of the problem that we had last year, no?
Well, I think the problem was more that you had 13 or 14 different offensive lines in 16 games. And again, I'm not sitting here telling you Nate Herbig should be a starter. I'm just saying that with another offseason and with some improvement, he could be a center. Jack Driscoll, we all thought played well. So it wasn't an issue of his performance. It was more that just that A, he was a rookie, and B, he was also hurt a little bit. Again, Mailata, Dillard, I mean, these guys are guys that have certain expectations for. So as long as you get 5 guys, Hunter, that you feel pretty confident in and they're healthy, then I think you have a different story.
Yeah, I agree with the fact if you have Dillard and Mailata, they battled out in training camp, the winner goes in and they play, and that person's there for the season. Let's say, what's your feeling on Kelsey?
It's a good one. I got to look into that a little bit more. He usually takes his time in deciding whether or not he wants to retire. This decision may not just be independently of his. His contract isn't that much, but it's big for a center, and center is not a position where a lot of teams budget a lot of money for because a lot of teams don't have centers as good as Jason Kelsey. So they're spending more than the average team at center with their Kelsey contract. So the Eagles may feel like it's time for them to move on, whether or not Jason Kelsey still wants to play.
What happens with Deshaun Jackson?
Oh, I think that he's not going to be coming back. I'd be very surprised if he's back.
Okay, couple quickies real fast. Any of the bigger name veterans that get paid money, I don't know the contract, but like Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Rodney McLeod, guys who are veterans who make decent money. Should they be worried?
I think the big two or big three are Deshaun, Malik Jackson, and Alshon Jeffrey. I think those 3 guys are extraordinarily unlikely to be back. Brandon Graham is interesting because ordinarily you'd probably say that's another guy you have to make a tough decision on, but they don't have a whole lot of 3-down defensive linemen to play on the edges. Josh Sweat and Derek Barnett have really been rotational guys so far, and I know they don't want to play Sweat as a 3-down lineman because of his past knee issues. So I don't know how easy it's going to be for them to say goodbye to Brandon Graham, but Zach Ertz, that's a guy who I think will probably get traded or could very likely get traded. McLeod got hurt. So if you're going to cut him, you'd have to do the whole, reach an injury settlement.
Yeah.
And that's another position where all of a sudden you're looking awfully young and inexperienced if you're just going forward with Kavon Wallace and Marcus Epps there as your top 2 safeties.
Do they explore bringing Mills back?
Oh, I forgot about Jalen Mills.
He's a free
I
agent.
think that is a very good question because we don't know what this defensive coordinator's tendencies are going to be.
No, yeah. Andrew yesterday said he felt that Mills fit this scheme better than Schwartz's scheme, but we'll see. Would they use him as a corner? Would they use him as a safety? That would all. There's so many questions here. And by the way, now that there's a new coordinator here, would linebacker be in play at number 6?
No, because the coordinator ain't going to make that call. The head coach not going to make that call. It's going to be the GM. You guys know that. So
Okay.
unless something changes, as long as Howie Roseman is still the GM and making the pick, then I'm not going to project them taking Micah Parsons at 6 overall.
All right, Geoff Mosher, football at 4. That was a lot we fit in there. We'll do it again, of course, tomorrow. Andrew, on Friday is Adam, and the Inside the Birds podcast has much more of this type of conversation. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. It drops at 6 a.m. We do it all off season right here on Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. All right, man, take care.
Just one glitch, right? That was it. One glitch.
That
We're
was
good
it.
now.
So whatever room you were in was all right.
All right, I'm walking off into retirement now. Take care.
Take care. All right, Football at 4. It's brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back for everything from skin care to cosmetic surgery. Go to iloveLyleBack.com. 856-MAKEOVER is the number. Lyle Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4.